Hey, it's Slay, and today I'd like to talk about a favorite book of mine, which was famous a decade ago and I'm sure you've heard of. It's called A Million Little Pieces. But more so than praise it and everything that it did well, I'd also like to examine its sequel, My Friend Leonard, and why I at least considered it a bit of a flop in comparison. It had similar elements in diction, but for several reasons it just didn't hit the same mark or renown. I've been waiting to make this for about a year since I reread it and its sequel because I hadn't read the sequel before, so I was like, oh, I'll just read the first one. So I always had this for, since it came out pretty much, and I picked this up at a library, and so I read them back to back. Probably wasn't the best idea because it made such a hard comparison between the two, but at the same time it made it a lot easier to see what did and didn't work between them. I had no idea that there was a new movie for A Million Little Pieces coming out this year until I googled A Million Little Pieces reviews to see if anybody else had done any. So, I guess that makes it a little relevant for some reason. I hope the movie's good, but we'll find out. Maybe I'll do a review on that too. So first, I'd just like to talk about A Million Little Pieces in and of itself. So what made A Million Little Pieces so amazing is the development of the humans inside. I don't say characters because it's creative nonfiction. So this is supposedly the journey of the actual author through his rehab. Whether they are exaggerated or even made up, the humans presented inside of the novel are arguably the most complex humans I've ever read in any other novel, and I think that's because they don't really follow the archetypes that generally apply to characters. They are broken and they are flawed with significant past experiences and traumas, which round out their personalities, giving actions that would otherwise seem a contradiction more of a beautiful cohesion. The best examples of this are seen in James, the protagonist and or author, but they're also present in just about every other significant character that he meets along the way. I'm not entirely sure if I'm actually going to put excerpts that I read into the video, but I'm just going to do them anyway to refresh myself and potentially refresh you. So here's an excerpt from page 165, where James goes into a room of other men and they're watching a TV. I sit down on the floor with the rest of the men and watch the end of a video. The video is about a famous football player who had a drinking problem and quit drinking using the 12 steps and is now a state Supreme Court justice and is very happy. As he speaks, he is sitting in his very official office and he's wearing his very impressive robe. There are pictures of him in his football uniform hanging behind him and everything is perfect and everything is inspirational. It's a lot like an after-school special. And even though I'm going to try to keep an open mind while I'm here, I think the thing is fucking stupid and I wonder if keeping an open mind at this place is the same thing as having an empty mind. Open mind, empty mind. This football player turned judge isn't going to convince me to do anything. No fucking way. The video ends and everyone claps except for me. I boo and I get a bunch of dirty looks. The looks make me laugh and I get more dirty looks for laughing, which makes me laugh more. Someone I don't know asks me what's so funny and I tell him the video and he tells me to grow up and I tell him that I'm not going to pretend that stupid shit is anything more than stupid shit and he walks away shaking his head. Open mind, empty mind. I wonder if they're the same thing. So in that passage, James displays his cynicism and general assholery, where most of us kind of shy away from confrontation and maintain a level of civility in situations we don't enjoy or technically agree with. James does not have any problem speaking his mind, even if it makes him enemies because it's in direct opposition to everyone else in the room. He's stubborn and he is headstrong and he is always ready to fight. And yet on page 170, which is literally only 5 pages away, we have a scene where he is sitting with John, promising that he will do his best to uphold the wishes of a confused, broken, and rather inappropriate man. Even though it is only 5 pages apart, these two very different scenes don't run in conflict with one another, because James is developed enough for us to understand where his sympathies lie. As much as he's not one for making friends, he's not blatantly against it, and he just doesn't take what he considers bullshit. So here's the scene from 170 where he's sympathizing with John. It's not overly articulate on his end, but he is willing to sit there and emotionally support him. Will you call her and tell her that I tried real hard this time, and as hard as I could, and that I wish I was more to her, and that I'm not as bad a man as everyone tells her I am. I take the card, look at John. I'd be honored, John. And if you're ever in the same place as her, maybe you could take her out to dinner or something, and he pauses, starts to cry, holds it back. And just be nice to her, and he can't hold it. He starts to cry, like a fragile little boy, and tell her I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. I reach out, and I hug him, and I hold him, and I let him cry, cry, cry. And he pushes me away, and he asks me to leave him alone, and I walk out of the room. I look towards him, and his head is buried in his pillow, and I can hear him sobbing and wailing and saying the word no, no, No. I leave him to himself and to his future, and as I walk into the unit, I make sure the card is deep and safe in my pocket. I will make that call when I leave here. I will make that call, and I will tell that girl that her father was a good man. She may not believe me, and there may not be anything to say that would change her mind, but I will tell her. So there you can see the sympathy that James has for the people around him, and throughout the novel, you see him bond differently with different people, and it becomes a very inspiring and passionate story between everyone that he meets. Mostly. There are so many great and relatable moments throughout the book. As much as James is harsh in his interactions with others, it's hard not to understand his point of view, and as more of his past is revealed, he becomes a compelling character like no other. He and the characters around him are imperfect, but as things progress, it's hard not to root for them to overcome their struggles, because their intentions compared to their actions are genuine and oh so human. That's something I think a lot of the books I read are lacking, is a human aspect. Authors fit characters into archetypes, rules, and conditions that each character is not allowed to break. Or if they do, it's very intentional, or it's kind of like, yeah, there was a reason they had to break this because of this thing that I did before, and you either saw this coming or your mind is blown, because there's no way you could have guessed that. Like how the tough guy has to be tough, or the love interest has to be pure or change for their significant other if they're not. So it becomes a perfect love story. Although in most of those cases, those relationships are actually fairly toxic. People don't know the difference. But anyway, in A Million Little Pieces, it's continuously breaking its own walls. James cries a lot, but he also has the resolve to rip off his own toenail to escape the emotions that he's going through. And the more of Lily's past that gets revealed, despite the things that she's had happen to her, she neither becomes less nor more pure. She just becomes a person whose past simply needs to be let go. Maybe that's it. Maybe it's the more you learn about the past of the characters, the more significant their progress forward become, and the less you care about the details of the past, it's just where they're going. Arguably the most unique part about the book, and why it got so much traction back in the day, in my opinion, is style of the prose. I'm sure that you can understand what I'm talking about when I was reading the excerpts from it. So we've got more prose poetry books today than we know what to do with, but back in the 2000s, if you didn't have sentence structure in your book, then the editors would pretty much not give you the time of day. A Million Little Pieces was new and exciting, and everyone's like, oh my gosh, look at this. Not only was it controversial, the content of it, but the writing style itself. Its paragraphs are usually just sentences and sometimes just single words, so simply laid out that there's no need for quotations around the dialogue. When it gets long-winded, there's no punctuation, and it often just repeats words to emphasize the focus of James's concerns. The whole book is like a cluster and yet also a complete rampage of just thoughts. And this style lends to the content of the book astronomically. It keeps you in time, you are in the moment in James' head, his thought processes, his pain that he's going through. There's a special kind of urgency that you get, and you get swept up in it as he's continuously losing and finding himself on his journey through rehab. And these are all of the little things that work really well, and A Million Little Pieces does really well. So that's the start of the differences between A Million Little Pieces and My Friend Leonard. If you ask me to tell you what happens in A Million Little Pieces, I have no end of poignant moments that I'd like to discuss and can remember. Protagonist is constantly proving himself and developing and dealing with conflicts both in and outside of himself. If you ask me what happens in My Friend Leonard, I'd say James tries dating some girls and that doesn't go super great, and Leonard takes him on a couple lunch dates. And that is part of what is so hard for me reviewing this book, because it's okay, but I wanted to love My Friend Leonard. Where most people wouldn't give it the time of day because the storyline is boring in comparison, anyone who truly loved the first book and really felt for the characters came to the second book to be bored. Honestly, I wanted to be happy that James overcame his struggles. I'm the kind of writer that sees significance in the mundane. I'd like boring passages that are just happy to read in comparison to the ones in A Million Little Pieces, but for some reason it was still really hard to read, even though I was looking for that, and I'd like to examine why. Why the two right beside each other could not be beside each other, even though they are a follow-up novel. So, in A Million Little Pieces, there's an urgency and an unknowing struggle and emotion. In My Friend Leonard, it's past that. As much as James's tone is similar, he is mild-mannered comparatively in the things that he does. Whereas before he was shown as hardened and more reasonable compared to the cast of baddies around him, in this one he's just out of place and struggling to socialize. Not that he can't socialize, it's more like the socializing that he's going through is missing the same depth. James in My Friend Leonard does not seem to grow. I say seem, okay? And that's a hard thing to say because he does grow. He's trying to be normal. And like on page 154, where he talks about having a nap, I did get that satisfaction and normalness that I was hoping for when I came to this book. It just didn't feel right. There were hints of the underworld drama that he was engulfed in the first book, but they never become relevant. Whereas I would have liked the entirety of it to just be him, normalness, inner struggle. There were little tie-ins or like callbacks. There was like the little edge of like, oh, maybe he's going to have that drink, and maybe he's going to get in the wrong side of the law because of the job he decides to take, or because of Leonard, or like so on and so forth. But the majority of the story is actually just him trying to date other girls and then not being very communicative in those relationships, or that not having the connection that he had with Lily. My Friend Leonard starts strong, but it felt wrong because A Million Little Pieces ended on a high note. You want to see James be with Lily on the outside and develop his friendship with Leonard. Those are the two things that you've come here for, or that have been set up for a sequel. But in the end notes of A Million Little Pieces, you find out that Lily killed herself. Literally, like, what was it, a day before James actually got out of jail, which was a real kick in the nuts. Like, when I read that one, just randomly, because I didn't know what it was like, oh, acknowledgments of what happened to people afterwards. And it just literally mentions, like, she kills herself right before he gets out of jail. I was reeling when I was a teenager. I was just like, are you fucking kidding me? How could she? How could she? Lily! Anyway, so you find out that Lily killed herself. And then James spirals at the start of the new novel because it does right before he gets out of jail, so he doesn't quite know that Lily is deceased. So you're right back in the love that they had for each other in A Million Little Pieces that was so, like, deep and intimate and beautiful, and then it just gets ripped away from you. It's devastating because of that severity. You spend the rest of the book going, why do I care when he's with other girls? Yeah, James is trying to have a normal relationship, but this is not what I was promised, and this is not really what I want. And I think that's unfair of me to say about the book, and I think it's unfair to the author because it is his life, but the complete absence of what we were here for is really off-putting when you put the two books together. To be convinced that him and Lily loved each other so wholly and deeply does not leave me room for connection to the day-to-day getting over her. If I don't get Lily, I want tragedy, and I got neither. I think that's the best way to describe the feel of My Friend Leonard in comparison to A Million Little Pieces, where the short, curt responses of A Million Little Pieces felt appropriate to the characters. The things that worked well are continued on to another completely different environment where they do not entirely fit. The book being called My Friend Leonard, I expected either Lily or Leonard, and I didn't get either. The time James spends with Leonard feels entirely without purpose. Leonard basically becomes a sugar daddy. The first thing that happens when James gets out and contacts him because Lily died was, well, it kind of went like this. Leonard, I need like $10,000. Oh my god, what happened? Are you in trouble? No, I just need it. Can I have it? Yeah, okay, dude. Okay, thanks. Bye. Love you. Whatever. And it's just that simple. Where when you're in normal life, there's a certain degree of questions and dialogue that needs to happen. It's not as severe, it's not as curt. You have the time to explore your emotions and talk to each other and develop your feelings and friendships and relationship. But it's still like, okay, we're hard bitches. What's up, you know? For me, all of the short conversations that they had throughout the book, even though they did meet multiple times, didn't have enough substance. Whereas before, they were talking about how hard their lives were, connecting with each other. They're not connecting anymore. They're just meeting each other and being chums. They're just being chums. And somehow, all of that is supposed to culminate in the ending. Spoiler alert, Leonard just disappears. James goes on with his life. He hits a point where it's just like, you know, I'm well enough that it doesn't really matter if Leonard would come back, but I wish he would. And so then Leonard finally messages him and it's just like, hey, come see me, and apparently he has AIDS and is dying because you can't be gay and a hard bitch. And James gets to say, oh, it doesn't matter to me, which we already knew it didn't, and it just doesn't feel as powerful. I realize that it is a very tough thing, and I mean, a man died, but when it comes to retelling your life or the drama you've gone through, things in general, there is a certain aspect of the hype and storytelling that you still have to go through to make people care. And I just feel like there wasn't enough of that. The ending feels thrown in the same way that all of the breakfasts with Leonard do. A Million Little Pieces builds a relationship with walled-off exchanges that develop into a lighthearted friendship, and My Friend Leonard starts with that already out of the way in terms of their interactions within just this book. There is none of the same development. They're just friends. They don't talk a lot. They're friends and they don't talk a lot, and Leonard just gives them things. They're chummy and they're not severe, and it's not the same at all. Because of this, I feel like My Friend Leonard should have been either a lot shorter or cut into small novellas, like one that deals entirely with losing Lily, then one entirely with the time he spends with Leonard, friendship, and how it ended up with him just really sucked. And another entire one probably focused on him normalizing the struggles of being normal after the life that he's gone through. There isn't enough focus on James's relationships or on his friendship with Leonard. They touch, but they don't develop each other, which leads the book to feel like a lot of filler. It feels like the book was not given as much care or passion as A Million Little Pieces, and it kind of shows. I picked it up and opened a page randomly just to find a quote to get started on what I wanted to talk about for this. And I literally just opened to page 71. And the first thing I read was, not, it's not. It's a Speedo and it's a fine bathing swimsuit. Like, it's supposed to be no, it's not, but just not, it's not was something made me go, oh, okay. Now, all of that. Let me read an excerpt from My Friend Leonard. As much as a lot of it missed the mark for me, there were the moments that did exactly what they were supposed to do. If the book was a single page and nothing else, I think this one would be good enough. And before I start, Cassius is James's dog. Cassius and I go home, back to our little house in the hills. I spend my time in front of a computer. He spends his time in front of the TV. We go for walks 3 times a day, once in the morning, once in the afternoon, once at night. I eat most of my meals at home. I rarely go out with friends. I read for 3 or 4 hours before I go to bed. I have a good life, a simple life. For the first time in my life, I'm happy and secure and stable. My fury, which has shaped most of the 25 years of my life, has faded without the fuel of drugs and alcohol, has faded as I have learned not to hate myself. Part of me is humbled by this life, this beautiful life. Another part of me feels incredibly fortunate. Part of me is waiting to fuck it up somehow, waiting to make some dumbass decision that destroys it, waiting for it to end. Part of me feels like it isn't complete without Lily. This is what she and I dreamed of having together. Sometimes I pretend she's here with me. I walk to an empty chair across the table. I wrap my arms around nothingness and tell her I love her. I tell her I'll be home in a little while when I leave. I tell her I'm tired and want to go to bed at the end of my long day. Even without her, I have all I need, my little house, my big funny dog, my legally earned money, my time, my own precious time to do whatever I want to do. I have simple things, a simple life, all I need. So that was what I was looking for when I came to My Friend Leonard, and the normalness that we wanted to see James achieve and be happy for him. Overall, I felt like this book had a lot of aspects that didn't get as much focus as they deserved. If I had a choice as an editor, I would have asked him to cut it up and focus more on the specific parts, not let all of them water each other down. All of that said, this review was inspired by how much I fucking loved A Million Little Pieces. I don't care what anybody else says. And My Friend Leonard was... It was okay. If James Frey ever watches this, which I doubt, I hope that he knows that I found his writing very inspiring, and that if he ever decides to do another book to perhaps shorten it, keep it to the length it's supposed to be. Don't drag it out like I feel like it probably was so that this could become another novel bestseller. Do things in the way that they come, in the way that all of the words came for this one. And also thank you for writing. So that was me in my first long book review. of something that's not entirely relevant. However, the new movie for A Million Little Pieces is coming out I don't know if it's coming out in 2019, but the trailer has just released. So I'm going to watch that. I'm going to make a review of that probably if I get around to seeing it in any relevant time. Not that I made this book review in any relevant time to when the book actually came out, but you know, at least I got around to it. So, this is like saying goodbye, and hopefully I'll post something else not more than 2 months away. Okay? Bye. Thanks for watching. Oh, and tell me how you felt A Million Little Pieces. I know that like most people have read it, and I don't think most people have read My Friend Leonard, but if you've read both, let me know how you felt about them compared to each other, and if you loved one but you didn't like the other, if you loved both of them, if you feel like they were actually a good sequel. I don't know, whatever. Just talk to me.